You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 38. The Cubs fail in Philly. Don't forget to download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter and Instagram. Fly the W on Facebook. Email us. flythew670 at gmail.com. All right, Crawly. Happy Sunday. We just watched the Cubs drop a series to the Phillies on this beautiful Sunday. How you doing so far?
I'm holding up. I mean, obviously, this was the road trip from hell, 9 games of misery. And so thankfully it's over and the Cubs come back home. Limping back home is the way to kind of put it.
Yeah, I'm sure that plane ride is not going to be very fun. And mercifully, I guess they get Monday off, and then they'll get the Mets coming into town on Tuesday. But let's rewind for everybody. Let's talk about game number 1, Marcus Stroman on the bump for the Cubs.
Yeah, the Stro Show versus Rangers Suarez, and the Cubs win this one 10-1. Remember, Stroman, he just had a great bounce back performance, the one we were hoping for after that rough short outing against the Twins last weekend. Went 6 innings pitched, gave up 3 hits, 1 run, and 2 walks with 4 Ks. He gave up only 1 hit, Dustin, after the first inning. He picked up his 8th quality start of the season. He's tied for the most in the majors, so...
Yeah, he definitely gives you an opportunity every time he gets out there, right? You're always going to be in a game for the most part with Marcus Stroman on the bump.
Right, 6 innings consistently. I mean, it's just quality start after quality start. Just not a lot to show for it, but happy to see that. You know, you got a little nervous after that Minnesota, he got shelled pretty good there, and so good to see him give the bullpen some length out of it and have a really good start. So I was happy about that.
Amen.
Nico Hoerner is back in the lineup. He makes his impact felt early on in this game with the Cubs up 2-1 in the second inning after a 2-run single by Nicky Madrigal. Nico hit a double that drove in 2 more runs to give the Cubs a 4-1 lead. He would add another 2-run double in the 5th that clunked off the glove of former Cub Nick Castellanos. The 4 RBIs for Nico tied a career high as he went 3 for 6. Seiya, Gomes, and Madrigal all went 2 for 4. Christopher Morel went 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a home run. I should just put that on repeat so I don't have to keep saying it. And then the Cubs scored 10 runs on 12 hits, 18 total bases, did leave 11 men on base, and went 3 for 14 with runners in scoring position. But that victory ended their season-high 5-game losing streak. So good to see
that was
the
one.
offense.
That was one they had to have, right? They had to have that, especially with Stroman on the mound. So it was really good. You felt fantastic seeing the offense. Nick Madrigal back, kind of the old how he goes, the Cubs go as far as that went. I'm sorry, Nico Hoerner, not Nick Madrigal. And but it was good to see Nick Madrigal get a couple hits too. I mean, some people wanted him shipped out of town, right? Maybe get rid of him, but he's doing all right.
Right, and so you felt good after that because you said, okay, well, you got that one, and you still got Justin Steele coming up. One thing that was interesting is Nick Birdy came into garbage time in the 9th inning with the Cubs way up. He gave up no hits, no runs, 1 walk, and 1 strikeout. That strikeout was against our old friend Kyle Schwarber with a pitch that hit 101 on the gun. That was the fastest Cubs pitch since Aroldis Chapman in Game 7 of 2016.
Yeah, see, that's crazy. Yeah, that pops, right? That pops at you, literally and figuratively. That's the fastest pitch since Game 7 of the World Series.
Right, and that's been the problem with the Cubs is you got all these guys that are kind of pitching to contact, and you don't have the flamethrowers that you see in a lot of these other bullpens. And so I guess that's kind of why I want Nick Birdy to have more chances. Are there going to be bumps in the road? Yes, there are going to be bumps in the road with some of these young guys, but there's a lot of upside with them as well.
Yeah, they listen, they could do a whole lot worse than Nick Birdy. Everybody at this point needs a chance. This bullpen is an absolute mess right now.
Yep, Game 2, you want to talk about a mess. Jameson Taillion versus Aaron Nola. The Cubs lose 12-3. If you wanted your Saturday freed up, Jameson made sure that happened as he was bad right away. He made up his 4th start back from the IL when he had a groin issue, and it's just been an absolute struggle. He gave up 6 runs in the first inning, a grand slam. Did you not predict that grand slam happening when he loaded the bases and Schwarber
Oh,
up?
of course. I mean, Schwarber just absolutely destroyed that baseball. Absolutely destroyed it.
You leave a hanging curveball to Kyle Schwarber, and that's what's going to happen. A 2-run homer to Cody Clemens. Clemens actually pitched the night before, position player pitching. He didn't look like his dad, but he also hits better than his dad. The Cubs were down 6-0 after the first inning. When asked about what was going on, Taillion said, being on a new team in a new place, you want to prove that I deserve to be here and I'm a good player. So far, I haven't had that opportunity to show that. It's been pretty crappy feeling, and obviously when you're pitching, you're out there by yourself. It's not fun, but you have no choice but to punch back, pick yourself up, find a way to punch back. He's not made it out of the 5th inning in any of his 4 starts since coming out of the IL. So I don't know, Dustin.
He's been disappointing, doesn't look right, doesn't seem to know where the ball is going. It's like his confidence is absolutely shaken right now.
And everyone's trying to figure it out. The numbers don't look absolutely awful. Just every time he gets 2 strikes, he can't finish it. It comes out to be a mess. And at every time when you think he might get off the hook and everything's going to be okay, just the worst possible situation happens. And I don't know if he has something wrong with him, if he needs a stint on the IL, go to Iowa, work it back. We'll see what happens. But right now, every time, it's almost a guaranteed loss. It is he hasn't won 1 start this year. The Cubs have not won a single game that he has started all year. And
big old zero. Yeah, big old zero.
At this point, you just wonder how long this can keep going. They're going to keep working it. Rucker, Estrada, Fulmer, and Birdie came out of the pen to pick up the slack. The only reliever to not give up a run was Jeremiah Estrada, who went 1.1 innings, gave up 0 runs, 0 hits, 1 walk, and had 3 Ks. Rucker gave up 2 runs. Fulmer gave up 1 run, and Birdie gave up 1 run as well. He gave up a leadoff triple to Garrett Stubbs, who scored on a wild pitch. But then he settled down and got a fly out and 2 strikeouts, and once again throwing that heat. So, just kind of something to keep in the back of your head. The offense, though, looked anemic. Horner, Happ, Suzuki, Mancini, and Wisdom were all hitless. Dansby Swanson hit a 2-run homer, and on repeat, Christopher Morel hit a solo home run. In his 10 games this season, Christopher Morel is batting .381, 16 for 42 with 3 doubles, 7 home runs, 13 RBIs, 14 runs scored, a .409 on-base percentage, a .952 slug. Since May 9th, Dustin, his first game of the season, he is tied for the major league lead in homers with Aaron Judge and extra base hits. Morel scored at least 1 run in each of his first 10 games this season. The only other Cub to do that since 1900, Hank Sauer, who was originally the original Mr. Cub, MVP, 1954. He held the streak for 13 games. What's more, Morel has also recorded at least 1 hit and 1 run in 10 consecutive games. He's the 13th Cub to have a streak of 10 games or longer with a hit or a run. The last Cub to do it, Mark DeRosa, May 9th to the 19th, 2008. Morel is the only Cub in franchise history since 1901 to hold such a streak from the start of the season.
Yep, it keeps making you wonder what if he had been here from the start, but maybe they knew what they were doing. They got him everything he needed and then some, and he's been able to bring it up here. Now they just got to figure out where to play him every day because his defense a little bit shaky. And Crawly, you mentioned about the offense, right? The offense broke. They struck out 13 times on Saturday as a team. 13.
We keep talking about these numbers, and again, I get it if you're a team full of power hitters. You take a look at, the team that usually when Philly has everybody healthy, and you take a look at like Castellanos and Schwarber and Bryce Harper. Who's the usual first baseman? Name skipping me, injured his knee. But when you look at that, those are a lot of guys that swing really hard. You know what I mean? The Cubs don't have a lot of power hitters, but they're striking out a lot, and that's what's driving me nuts.
Super frustrating. Absolutely frustrating. And it would continue as we get into Game 3, Crawly.
Justin Steele versus Taijuan Walker. Justin Steele after the flu game, right? A la the Michael Jordan. He was back to his all-star looking ways after a touch of the flu in Houston. He went 6 innings, gave up 4 hits, 1 walk, and 6 Ks. Got in a little trouble in a few innings. In the second with 2 on and 1 out, but was able to get a couple of ground outs to get out of the inning. He gave out a 2-out double to Dalton Guthrie, but was able to get Trey Turner to ground out. And then he gave up a leadoff double to Nick Castellano in the 6th, but the next batter, Bryce Harper, flied out to Seiya Suzuki, who threw a strike to third, and Castellanos was out.
Yeah, so that was a laser beam, man. That was a laser beam throw.
Right, that was the first out, and it was at third base, which you never do. So, hey, it was great to see Justin Steele looking like his normal self. Just did a fantastic job. Now, on the offense, once again, that were non-existent against Taijuan Walker, who came into the game with an ERA over 5. He held the Cubs to only 2 hits over 5.2 innings. He had 3 walks and 3 Ks. Cubs helped him out with some sloppy base running. They got picked off twice. In the 2nd, Mike Tauchman was caught off first on a back pick by JT Realmuto. And in the 4th, Dansby Swanson singled, but was picked off by Taijuan Walker. Cubs had their best chance to score in the 6th, and I thought maybe this is the one where they break it open, right? Nico, with 1 out, Nico draws a walk, reaches second on a throwing error, and then Dansby walks. You got guys at first and second with 1 out, but Happ flied out and Seiya struck out to end the inning. Christopher Morel on repeat, hitting a solo home run, this time in the 9th off former Cubs closer Craig Kimbrell, to get a Cubs a 3rd hit and keep his homer streak going and to keep the Cubs from getting shut out. But that was the only run the Cubs would score. During Justin's last inning of the 6th, though, I thought this was interesting. Jeremiah Estrada was up and throwing first, right, in the pen. But then he sat down and Alzolay got back up. He was the first one to come out of the pen. He got the first out, but then gave up a double to Edmundo Sosa. Then pitch hitter Bryson Stott hit a 2-run homer, his first as a pitch hitter, and the Cubs were down 2-0. We talked about this in the last episode, Dustin. Some of this is Ross's fault. Some of it's on the players. This is not on Ross. I mean, you sit there.
No, that's not on Ross. That is not on Ross. I will not blame David Ross for that. But I do have a question, because when I was watching that part of the game, Crawly, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you might have the answer. What was going on with that arm sling or brace or what was that? What was that all about? They made him take it off. Ross had to come out and say, "What's going on?" What was that about?
I have no idea. I saw him kind of playing around with it in the bullpen when he was warming up, and then
he came out. Yeah, he came out and had it on his arm, but then the umpires made him take it off. I haven't heard anything
about it yet. Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I didn't see anything on social media either about it. So I don't know if that played a role, like the umpire taking him out of his rhythm, perhaps, or making him not feel as confident because that was not on his person anymore. I don't know.
I don't know too. You wonder if, like you said, if it was the ups or if it was the opposing manager playing a little gamesmanship, getting in his head.
Right, little gamesmanship. Yep.
Don't know, but I know. This is what Joe Madden, who's going to be at Club 400, tickets go on sale this Friday. But Joe Madden used to call outcome bias. We know what happened, and we know that it was bad. He gave up the home run. I do wonder what would have happened if Jeremiah Estrada would have kept throwing in the 7th and gotten out there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just curious to see what would have happened, but woulda, coulda, should have, but you didn't win. It was an awful road trip. Now let's be realistic here. The
2-7, Crawly. That's about as bad as it could get.
Right. Keep in mind you did have a flu bug going in there. You had 3 playoff teams that you had to face, and the Cubs were not a playoff team. They're trying to get there, but you can see they're falling short here. And to me, this was always a concern we talked about in all offseason, where the run's going to come from. We've talked about it on the show. You don't win many games scoring only a 1 run, and you're just putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the bullpen all the time, striking out this much, leaving all these men on base. And so that's where you have zero margin for error, right? You can't sit there, and every little mistake that you make gets magnified because you just don't have the opportunity to do anything. And so that's just the frustrating thing. You just aren't scoring enough runs. You do this all the time. You score 10 runs, 12 runs, 13 runs, and then the next couple games you get 1 or 2 runs. And again, some of those will come in garbage time. You know what I mean? When you got some bum reliever out there on the opposing team. So,
right.
I would say that I'm very glad that the Cubs are going to come home, and it's not like the stretch gets much easier, but at least they're home and hopefully they can, get some home cooking going.
Right, that'll be on Tuesday. Monday is a day off. Drew Smiley will throw on Tuesday. We're going to preview that for you guys in just a second. This is the Fly the W 670 podcast. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to our podcast. And in this segment, Crawly's talking to Tommy Birch of the Des Moines Register.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we have our old friend Tommy Birch from the Des Moines Register. Tommy, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing pretty good. Kind of lonely. The Iowa Cubs are in the midst of a 12-game road stand, so it's going to be a while before I see any baseball in Des Moines.
Yeah, they were just finished up a series in Indianapolis, and it's been interesting because obviously there's a lot of movement going on between the Chicago and the Cubs. So you're kind of like in the middle of watching this whole storm kind of happening right here. Now, you wrote an article that interested me the other day about Kyle Hendricks and his trip to Chicago. He just came to Houston the other day. But for people that weren't aware, Kyle Hendricks obviously had a shoulder issue that was going down, and he was shut down last season. When was it? Right around June, July-ish?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And, it's just been weird because, ever since Kyle Hendricks has come up, he's really kind of been, Mr. Dependable in the rotation. And so it's been a while since Kyle's been throwing, and he was down in Iowa. And of course, there's going to be some time that kind of takes to adjust. But man, with the way that we see the pitching here in Chicago, especially with Jameson Taillion, everyone's just kind of clamoring to get Kyle Hendricks back up. What did you see that changed from when he went to go visit Tommy Hotovy up in Chicago?
Results. I mean, for kind of the novice baseball expert like myself, I've been watching baseball my whole life. I'm not the pitching gurus of Tommy Hotovy and Ron Falone, but Kyle had actually told me when he went back to Chicago, they looked at some film of one of his outings from 2016. I think it was sometime during his past. They went back, looked at one of his old starts when he was really at his best. And they had one of his starts from when he was with Iowa and overlaid the video. I could tell his timing was off, and essentially he was kind of rushing everything, and that kind of threw everything out of sync for him, where his fastball wasn't going where he wanted to, his off-speed stuff wasn't going everywhere he wanted to, which is just absolutely vital for Kyle Hendricks, who does not have really electric stuff that's going to just overpower everybody. As we all know, he relies so much on location. So that little bit of timing was just throwing everything off. He came back to Iowa, slowed down his delivery a little bit more, got it to where he wanted it to be, started hitting his spots. And what we've seen are 3 really good outings out of him ever since that trip back to Chicago, where he's looked great. I would say the only thing that's kind of missing is kind of building up that pitch count, building up that stamina. He's getting better and better with it. His last outing in Indianapolis was much better, where he pitched into the 6th inning again. But I think it's still one of those things where he's still trying to get back into that full game shape moving forward.
Yeah, he went 6 innings pitched. He gave up 1 run, 5 hits, no walks, and 6 Ks. So hopefully the Kyle Hendricks of old, and there's people wondering if maybe he even comes up to Chicago for the series against the Reds, possibly.
Yeah, it could be that way right now with how well he's pitching. Like I said, 3 straight outings where he's looked really, really sharp. I think once he kind of has gotten to that 6th inning, that's where kind of the stuff dips down a little bit more. And it's kind of like, I think what you see during a typical spring training for any starter, where you just kind of have to build up that max, build up that stamina, and get back into a better routine, which he essentially is. And that's why I think even those first couple outings, it really wasn't a major concern by any means, where you looked at it like, okay, this is what a guy during spring training does. The first couple outings, it's just about getting out there. It's just about getting on the mound, throwing your stuff, and eventually getting into a good rhythm, which is what Cal Hendricks has done lately.
Now, the Cubs made a flurry of moves to start the weekend, and one of those moves was Hayden Wesneski going down to, or I'm sorry, that happened previously, but Hayden Wesneski was recently optioned to Iowa. Have you had a chance to talk to him at all, or not really?
Haven't gotten a chance to talk to Hayden yet, but his stuff looked absolutely great in his first outing with Iowa on the road in Indianapolis. I think he threw 5 no-hit innings. Just going back through the stats, he relied heavily on a sweeper. I think 11, 12, 13 swing and misses, somewhere around there. So the only concern would have been the 4 walks. He had 4 walks during that outing, but it's exactly what you want to see from a guy that is coming back down to the minor leagues after getting a demotion, where he just goes out there and absolutely shoves, and kind of looked a lot like the guy that we had saw in Chicago at times this year, mostly at times at the end of last year, where he's just got great stuff. He's got swing and miss type stuff, and he's got flat out dominant stuff when he's on. I think for him, it's going to be more about finding consistency, being able to put together outing after outing, inning after inning, of just kind of being that dominant guy that we've seen at times.
Now, another guy that was just recently sent to Iowa, was optioned to Iowa, was Keegan Thompson, who has struggled this season. And, he was kind of taken aback. And I think that's hard sometimes. These guys work so hard to get to the majors, and what it's like, beautiful clubhouse and nice flights and all this stuff. And then they got
that in Iowa. They've got a nice clubhouse.
I haven't been in the Iowa clubhouse yet.
Definitely not the flights, but yeah, I mean, it's so tough, especially when you're a guy like Keegan Thompson, who's gone up there and absolutely shoved and really solidified yourself as part of the plans moving forward. I think there was a point in his career where he's probably thinking like, okay, I've done my time in the minor leagues. I've done my time in Iowa. I've solidified myself as a big league reliever moving forward. And I think this is something we have seen from Cubs players over the years. It's going to be, how does he respond to it? And if he responds well, gets the work in, there's truly a path moving forward to have him go back up there and have great success. We saw it with Ian Happ. We saw it with Kyle Schwarber. We've seen it with a ton of guys, Christopher Morel, who have gone back to the minor leagues, done what they've had to do, gone back up and absolutely flourished. So I think for him, it's going to be embracing that time back in the minor leagues, seeing done what he's got to get done, and then getting back on that path moving forward, because, look, he is going to be a valuable asset for the Cubs moving forward. He was a valuable piece of that bullpen last year, and they're definitely counting on him again this year.
Now, how surprised are you? You mentioned Chris Morel. I mean, everybody knows the kid's got talent and all this stuff, but this is big league pitching. I don't care who it is. And the guy is just hitting home run after home run. Even today, he gets another one. How shocked are you at the success Chris has had? And did you see him working a lot with John Maley? I know they've talked a lot on the broadcast about moving his hands down lower and all that stuff. What did you see when he was in Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, they told him, look, there were 2 things they really wanted him to work on. They wanted the strikeout rate to go down. They wanted the walk rate to go up. The strikeout rate went down a little bit. It wasn't like drastic numbers where you saw a 9-day difference in Christopher Morel. You saw the walk rate go up. The most important thing, I think, when I saw Christopher Morel down here was that he was having competitive at-bats all the time. He wasn't wasting at-bats, chasing pitches out of the zone constantly. You still had that chase from time to time, but to a certain degree, that's what you like about Christopher Morel too, is that aggressiveness, and that aggressiveness leads to a lot of success, like we're seeing at the big league level, where he's going to show off a ton of power. He's going to show off a ton of ability to just electrify that offense, something that they've been sorely missing now. What he's done in Chicago is absolutely astounding me, because you look at what he had done in Iowa, he had actually kind of cooled off over the last week before he got called up. So kind of wondered, like, okay, is this almost kind of a weird time to call him up? There was a need. They needed to bring him up, though. But he has just absolutely torn apart opposing pitching in Chicago. He tore apart opposing pitching in the minor leagues. And he is one of the best hitters on the planet right now when it comes to any level. What he did at AAA, what he's doing at the major league level. Look, it's going to be impossible for him to keep it up. But if you can have some level of that success moving forward, man, that's going to be a valuable piece for the Cubs moving forward, because he offers so many different things that are just insurmountably valuable to the Cubs. Like I mentioned, that power, he offers versatility, a guy that can play the infield, can play the outfield, and can do a really good job of that too. And just the electric ability that provides. I mean, it's a legit spark that you see guys feed off of left and right, and it's an infectious energy that he has every day at the park. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody like that. And we talk about guys that have gone up and down between the minor leagues. I'd mentioned the Ian Happs, the Kyle Schwarbers, when it came to talking about Keegan Thompson. When Morel got sent down to the minors, he fully embraced it. He was a guy that had a smile on his face all the time. He was legitimately just happy to be playing baseball anywhere. He didn't care if he was playing baseball in Chicago. He didn't care if he was playing baseball in Des Moines. Obviously, the preference is I want to be in the big leagues, but he was a guy that was just happy to be in the lineup every day. And I'm sure you're going to be in a great mood when you were absolutely raking like he was every day. So, does it surprise me what he's doing? Not completely, but I mean, I would say the level that he is doing, it's absolutely insane right now.
Now, the Cub fans were kind of shocked because when they made that flurry of moves this last weekend, one guy that nobody expected to come back up was Edwin Rios. And so it's kind of like, okay, Edwin Rios is back up. What was he doing anything in Iowa that you said, okay, I see this guy getting ready to come back up to Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, he showed some power. He had a couple of home runs. He had some really good at-bats. He was a good clubhouse guy there. Another guy that seemed totally fine with the idea of being sent down to the minors. I think a guy that totally understood the numbers part of it and where his situation was in the grand scheme of things, but probably had a pretty good idea knowing, like, okay, the amount of experience he has, the left-handed pop that he can offer. He probably knew, like, okay, at some point I'm going back to the big leagues. So it's probably a little bit easier to digest a demotion when you know you're going to go back up. But I think just the fact that he had come down here, he had played pretty well. He had put together good at-bats. He had shown power. He's a veteran. He's a guy that is going to be a good clubhouse presence. It didn't really shock me that he went back up. Just the flurry of all the moves that came all at once and the variety of them definitely shocked me. And, when it came to a guy like Keegan Thompson, going back to him, I kind of wondered, like, okay, how long are they going to have that patience?
Now, we were talking about Keegan Thompson, two guys that recently got called up, Jeremiah Estrada and Nick Burdi. With Nick Burdi, we know obviously, has to get the control down. We know he has the heat. He's throwing gas. But, the thing that concerns me, Tommy, and I'm like I said, I'm just a guy watching on my TV, is it just doesn't seem like they give these guys chances. Like they come up and it's like, I don't know if it's just managers are nervous or if they see something that I don't. But when I see Jeremiah Estrada, I'm like, why is this guy always constantly either in garbage time or after the lead's already been given up? Like, why isn't he given an opportunity when all these other guys are failing?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like earning that trust when it comes to David Ross. Like, okay, we're going to put you in these situations early on. If you do well, I'm going to put you in some more high leverage situations. I'm going to give you some more opportunities moving forward, which in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword where, you want to get them experience, but you're wanting them to kind of prove themselves, but also like some of the situations just become really, really hard to navigate through, especially when you're coming into a blowout game or you're coming into a game where, the bases are loaded and there's one out. For a long time, the name I always thought back to, and this long before David Ross, this is, a long time ago, the one guy who just absolutely dominated in AAA and was a lights out reliever, back into the bullpen guy for the Iowa Cubs that was constantly being tossed into really tough situations and struggled all the time in Chicago was Brian Schlitter. And I know Cubs fans are probably just like cringing when they hear that name because like Schlitter would go up and just would struggle at so many different times. But part of that was the situation was dictating, like, man, he was getting put in some really, really tough situations. So, like I said, it's kind of a double-edged sword where, like, one, you want to give those guys some good opportunities, but two, like, the kind of philosophy, at least by the Cubs, when it comes to managing the bullpen, using some young, inexperienced arms, is saying like, okay, we're going to put you out there, but you got to earn those other opportunities. And to earn those other opportunities, you got to dig through some of these tough chances early on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's kind of tricky because look, I get it. If you got a really good bullpen and it's like, man, where we'll just kind of put these guys where we need them. But it's like, man, with these guys, it's like, it just seems like there's a different guy blowing a lead or blowing a save or blowing a hold every day. It's like, why not see what you got? And I think to me, that's the toughest thing when you see these guys come from AAA is that like they never really get a chance to kind of get in any type of rhythm, which, I mean, it's a good thing in one regard because it means you got talent up in the major league. But for these guys, like I think about Nelson Velasquez, it's like, okay, he gets like a start and then he sits for like 4 days. And then it's like, okay, now you're back in against this really tough pitcher.
Well, and Nelson's situation was really tough to comprehend too, and the idea that, the first time he gets called up, he's the hottest hitter on the planet. We had said that about Christopher Morel, but look at the numbers that Nelson Velasquez had put together when he was at AAA to start this season. He goes up, I think hits a grand slam and then sat the next day. And, part of the deal is, when you're calling a guy up from AAA, a lot of the times is you're calling up that guy because he's hitting really well and you want to utilize kind of that hot streak that's going on. And that was really tough. I know, when Nelson first went up, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like they got to play him every day and let him get into a rhythm because or else you are going to just cool off one of the hottest hitters in your entire organization. And when it comes to bullpen arms, it's really intriguing too that you look at what they do so many times in AAA. You talk about guys like Nick Birdie, Manny Rodriguez, who's done okay at times here. I think if you look at the numbers on Manny Rodriguez, they're kind of inflated by a couple of bad outings. But, guys like Nick Birdie, they're in Iowa pitching 7th, 8th, 9th inning. But then they're going up to Chicago and being exposed to a completely different type of situation. So you hear it all the time that you want things to be as normal as possible. When you go up to the big league level, one of the biggest adjustments you have to adapt to is the idea that your role is going to change, usually monumentally. You look at, a guy like Nelson Velasquez, who we were just talking about, who went from playing every day in Iowa to then you're kind of grinding out at bats in Chicago. Then when you talk about the bullpen guys, you're talking about like, okay, I went from a late inning guy to I'm going to get some mop up duty or some really tough situations thrown at me. So it's all about kind of adapting to that next level and the different situations that are going to get thrown at you, because just because you get thrown into that situation in AAA doesn't mean you're going to get thrown into that situation in the big league level.
Right. Now I told you about the Cubs bullpen struggles, and we've seen Birdie, we've seen Estrada. Obviously, Cam Sanders, they're still working on control issues with him. Who would you say would be the next person to be called up if the Cubs needed bullpen help?
Yeah, I mean, man, both those options are really intriguing. I've always been a Cam Sanders guy just because I love the stuff, the velo, the wipeout stuff. Control has been missing at times for him, but, he's a guy that will walk 2, strike out 3 in an inning. So he's got some really good stuff. I think if he can just pound the strikes out a little bit more, like he's going to be knocking on the door of the big leagues. Obviously, another guy is Cody Hoyer, who's still working his way back from Tommy John surgery. I thought, like, man, when I first saw they was coming to AAA and he was starting that rehab assignment, seemed really fast for a guy that was coming off Tommy John. And I think you saw that early on where some of the first couple outings were a little rough. He got roughed up a little bit. He had trouble with his command. He's starting to get that back. The velo is really getting up there too. So he's a guy that probably needs a little bit more time. And I think you kind of want to get him into a rhythm too. And realistically, like, what are you going to rush him back for right now? You want to make sure he is in a good spot physically, mentally, all that type of stuff. But him, Cam Sanders, Manny Rodriguez, is a guy who's been throwing in the high 90s as well and has looked really good at times. And like I had said before, the statistics probably don't tell a full story when it comes to Manny, but he's also had some control issues as well. So, Horton's another guy that they really, really seem to love. He's a guy that I think would be up in the big leagues at some point this season, but all those guys are probably, guys that are at least knocking on the door of the big leagues right now.
Yeah, you're talking about Bailey Horn. One last guy I want to talk about is Javier Assad. We saw the spring training was amazing. We saw the World Baseball Classic. Struggled when he came out of the gate here in Chicago, but I felt like the second time he came up, he looked much more like that guy we saw in spring than we did in early April. Do you, to me, I think the Cubs misused Keegan. I thought he did best in a multi-inning role, and they kind of moved away from that and kind of played around with that. I think with him on the side, you got guys that can, when you have the short starts from, say, a Jamison Taillion, or the other day you had Marcus Stroman. Those are guys that can eat 4 or 5 innings, and I think that's where they really belong. What's going on with Javier? I mean, he was the one that we were surprised didn't come up when Edwin Rios got the call up.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been inconsistent too. He's had some really good outings, and they're kind of in that really tough spot where, it's like they're asking him to start, but also like there's still that time where they're still working him back into a starter, and where he's kind of bounced in between these really tough roles between what he's been doing in Chicago, what he's being done in Iowa, and having to bounce back and forth. So I think it's been, once again, one of those situations where it's a really tough situation to ask the guy to find that level of consistency. Now, of course, that's being asked, all across the nation by different guys in different organizations who are having to bounce up and down. But it is a really tough thing, especially when you're kind of being used in and out of the bullpen. You're being looked at as a possible spot starter type guy. Your role is changing, so much more drastically than what we were talking about before, where you're talking about guys pitching, maybe in the 5th inning as opposed to the 7th inning, where as opposed to you're talking about Javier Assad possibly spot starting versus being a long relief guy. It's just so many different hats. And I think that makes it really difficult to kind of maintain a level of consistency moving forward. But he's shown some really good flashes at sometimes. And, he's kind of the forgotten guy when it comes to the arms. And the other guy that I would say that's kind of the forgotten guy when it comes to arms in Iowa is Caleb Killian too, who's looked really sharp at times in Iowa. But I think that starting Chicago and what David Ross said moving forward has kind of led people to kind of write off Caleb Killian, right, wrong, indifferent. I don't know, but he's still a guy that really intrigues me as well.
All right. Well, Tommy, I appreciate you jumping on and giving us the pulse of what's going on in Iowa. And there's just so much, like I said, motion happening. Tell our listeners where they can read your work and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, go buy a newspaper. No, most of them probably are picking up Des Moines Registers at the newsstand, but DesMoinesRegister.com. Follow me on Twitter at Tommy Birch, and we have a lot of good content coming this week. I think you're going to have a Ben Brown story that I think fans will like, and probably a Jake Slaughter story coming too. Another guy that, like, out of all these guys that we're talking about, that's a guy who's absolutely raked the entire year. Now that he's been down in AAA, but somebody that realistically, where is he going to go this season right now? But definitely a name to keep an eye on.
All righty. We'll be following these stories closely, Tommy. Thank you for jumping on, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Crawly, great job with that one. Really like Tommy Birch. Great guy. Great coverage of the Cubs. This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 38. The Cubs fail in Philadelphia. And in this segment, Crawly, we're going to talk a little roster moves and do a little preview of the upcoming homestand. It's a long one, too, this time.
Well, before the game on Friday, Cubs, social media, Cub fans, and now around the world were enjoying seeing some of these roster moves. The biggest, the one that we've been talking about for the while, Eric Hosmer was finally DFA'd. I have nothing personal against Eric Hosmer. He never did anything to me personally or as an opposing player. The guy made $170+ million in his career. I wish him nothing but the best. I heard nothing about the best. But look, he couldn't be on the roster anymore. Just couldn't. It's time to kind of start cutting some of the fat here and getting rid of players that can't produce. He was high up there. His best years in baseball were long behind him. There's a reason that San Diego didn't want him. There's a reason that Boston didn't want to re-sign him. It is what it is. Every player has to go through it at some point in time. I wish him nothing but the best. No ill will. But I'm glad he's not on this roster anymore.
Right, no ill will. Hopefully this won't shy other guys that are in his position from coming here. I do think it was a little bit quick, but he wasn't doing anything. He was getting in the way, and he was there, so Ross was using him at times, and we all were wondering why he was using him, when he was using him. So I guess I'm going to have to agree that sometimes you just have to, sometimes you just have to cut your losses.
I think too, Dustin, what kind of drives me nuts is sometimes if you sit there and you leave the guy on the roster, David Ross wanted to play him all the time. I don't know if that was Jed or what was going on, but as long as he was on the team, I thought that David Ross was going to kind of keep trying to play him way more than he should have. You and I talked about this. He should have played maybe one day a week, and he should have been on playing maybe first during that time, and that's it. But that wasn't happening. It was this consistent playing him every day, putting him in not every day, but putting him in the roster way too much and DHing him and doing all sorts of weird things that, if he can't play him right, then just cut him so that he doesn't have the option to play him wrong. You know what I mean?
Right. He'll be just fine. Like you said, made over $100 million in his career. So don't anybody out there listening feel bad for Eric Hosmer.
No. Now, as I kind of thought, the Cubs did place Cody Bellinger on the 10-day IL. If you notice, this is a habit with the Cubs. Everything looks like it's going to be okay, and then a couple of days later, they put him on the IL. This is retroactive to May 16th. It's just a smart move. I mean, if you miss a couple of days, you need to let these things heal. Ross said the knee he injured making that incredible catch in Houston was responding slowly, so the Cubs decided to play it safe. Mike Tauchman was selected from AAA. That gave the Cubs a lefty bat who can provide depth in center field. I know that you were talking earlier, Dustin, about not feeling 100% confident in Christopher Morel's defense, and to me, he is a third baseman. I hate trying to convert people to center fielders. Or, I don't like that at all. So this is
center's tough. Center's just not just to go out there and play it. No.
Right. And I like Tauchman, and he made a great play today. I think he's going to be good for depth in center field. David Ross said, though, about Eric Hosmer, super difficult conversation. He's been a big part of impacting this group since spring training. The way he comes into work every day, just an emotional day from that standpoint. That's probably the worst part of my job, having those types of conversations. He's a professional as I've ever been around. In the 31 games for the Cubs, Hosmer hit .234 with 2 homers, 14 RBIs. But I think sometimes, too, and remember David Ross, he wasn't a superstar player. He was a guy that was somebody that was a really good clubhouse guy, gave you, kept professionalism in that locker room. A lot of people said he was the leader, the captain of that 2016 team. And I think that, when he has to have that conversation, he probably remembers what that was like to be on the other end of it,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's got to be a difficult thing, but I guess that's part of what goes into being a big league skipper, right?
Right. And we talked about this on the last show. Keegan Thompson was optioned to AAA. Edwin Rios was recalled from Iowa, which surprised me. So the Cubs are playing one pitcher down. They have one additional position player.
Doesn't make any sense to me at all. That doesn't make any sense at all, the way this bullpen's been performing.
I don't know if there was anybody.
Why is Assad not up here?
That I could not tell you as of right now, but Keegan's had a 4.22 ERA, 16 strikeouts, 14 walks, and 21 in the third innings. He had that disastrous outing on Thursday. It was Wednesday. On Wednesday, where he basically gave up the winning runs, and I just think that this was on the Cubs. I think they misused him from the beginning. We always said multi-inning role. They started playing around with that. I didn't like it. And hopefully he can get straightened out in Iowa. I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll be back up.
Yeah, eventually he will be back up. No doubt about it.
On Saturday, the Cubs, and you just heard with the interview with Tommy Birch, they played a doubleheader in Indianapolis. There was a rainout the other day, and so Kyle Hendricks went 6 innings pitch, gave up 1 run on 5 hits, no walks, 6 Ks in a 2-1 Cubs victory. He'd be able to start Friday or Saturday for the Cubs again, that next series coming up, so just kind of be aware. I think that might be Cincinnati. So they go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, yeah, it looks like he would be in line to pitch against Cincinnati. Not only that, Hayden Wesneski started game 2 of that doubleheader. He went 5 innings pitched, gave up no hits, no runs, 4 walks, and 5 Ks. So, we're going to be watching Hayden real close, and hopefully he gets those walks down, and we'll be. Well,
that's just it, right? That's it. The walks is what really bugs you about the whole thing. 4 walks? Come on.
It's not just the walks, but it's also just how they're kind of coming about. Like sometimes you got a tight umpire or something like that. You can't have uncompetitive pitches, especially if you're a guy like Hayden. If a guy can just sit there and lay off and you're falling behind in the counts, you can get away with that in AAA. You fall behind in counts in the major league. You saw what happened to Hayden. He's going to get whacked.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
So the Cubs have the Mets coming into town. Thank God the Cubs are back after that awful, awful road trip that we talked about. The Mets last season went 101-61, finishing second in the NL East to the Atlanta Braves. The Cubs played the Mets 7 times last season. They actually took the series 4-3, but they lost 3 of 4 at Wrigley, but swept the Mets at Shea Stadium. The Mets lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Padres, 2-1, and owner Steve Cohen decided, I'm going on a spending spree, and that's what he did. Got some key additions, center fielder Brandon Nimmo, right-handed pitcher Edwin Diaz, all of these guys that they signed back. Justin Verlander, Kodai Senga, who we were hoping coming to the Cubs and that we'll see on Tuesday, Jose Quintana, former Cub, catcher Omar Narvaez, right-handed pitcher Adam Ottavino, right-handed pitcher David Robertson, who the Cubs traded last year. You have Tommy Pham, Danny Mendick, infielder, left-handed pitcher Brooks Raley, and Elieser Hernandez. I think, though, Mendick just went down, didn't they? Or I'm not positive.
I believe so. I believe you're right.
But they also had some losses. Jacob deGrom gone, Taijuan Walker. We just saw him with the Phillies. Right-handed pitcher Chris Bassett, James McCann, Seth Lugo, Trevor Williams, Trevor May, Michael Givens, Joely Rodriguez, and first baseman Dominic Smith. So a lot of shuffling for the Mets this season. And don't forget, they were involved in that Carlos Correa craziness. He was on the Mets for a little bit until he wasn't.
Right. Until he wasn't. All right, Crawly, I guess we have to do it, right? We got to look at the standings.
Yeah, the Cubs lost 2 of 3 to the Phillies. Their record is now 20-26, season high, 6 games under 500. If everything stays the same, currently the Cardinals are beating the Dodgers. The Cubs would be in 4th place by percentage points. Milwaukee's still in 1st place. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They were winning last I checked, 24-21. Pittsburgh, 24-21. So in 2nd place, they're 4-6 in their last 10. Same with Milwaukee. But the Cubs, 3-7 in their last 10. They're at 20-26. Like I said, the Cardinals winning right now, but they're currently at 20-27. And Cincinnati has dropped into the cellar. So it is no longer the Cardinals in the basement. We don't get to laugh about that anymore. In fact, we have to get worried that they're just about to pass the Cubs.
Right. That's what we have to worry about now is the Mets are coming into town, Crawly, for 3 games starting up on Tuesday. And, of course, You can hear those games on 670 The Score. Game 1, Drew Smyly.
Right. The Mets are 3rd in the NL East at 24-23. They're on a 4-game win streak. They're playing the Cleveland Guardians tonight. They took the first game on Friday. We're rained out on Saturday, so I'm hoping they're tired.
Double header, right? They got a double header going today.
Right. So you take a look, Atlanta, Miami, then the Mets. When we were frustrated about losing to Miami, sometimes there's teams that surprise you, and Miami's had a pretty good start. Philly has not, and you could see that Washington is clearly in the basement, so we can still be angry about that series. What was that, the beginning of May? So it is Drew Smyly taking the bump, Mr. Consistent, the guy that always keeps you in it. And, he was the one that, that loss, he didn't get a loss. He got a no decision in that start against Houston, which was frustrating because he pitched so well and the Cubs really needed that win and did not get it. When you look at Drew Smyly, like I said, that start against Houston, pitched absolutely well, 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run. And against Minnesota, he was the only one that did well. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 earned runs. So this is going to be interesting. I'm going to be at this game. So A, it's fun to watch Smyly. B, I am excited to watch Cody Bellinger because I have never seen him pitch before, and this is his first time pitching in Wrigley Field. He has that fork ball, which is kind of the ghost fork ball that everybody's been talking about. Against Tampa Bay in his last start, he went 6 innings. He gave up 3 hits and 1 run with 12 Ks against the best team in baseball. So, Dustin, I'm a little nervous, but 5-11 in Cincinnati, he went 5 innings. He gave up 8 hits and 5 runs. So who knows baseball, right?
Right, who knows baseball. Drew Smyly has been doing it for the Cubs, no doubt about that. I think he's as consistent as they come. Only Stro and Steel is better than him overall at this point. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see Cody Bellinger at Wrigley and what that's like for him. Of course, hoping that the bats wake up on the way back from Philadelphia and they can get to him.
Well, as you know, nobody on the Cubs has ever seen Cody Bellinger. So what would you put the over-under on strikeouts for the Cubs? 10?
Ooh, boy, that's too high. I'd probably put it at 8.5.
8.5. All right.
8.5. Over under 8.5. Unfortunately, I probably right now at 4:24 on Sunday after what just happened this weekend, I'd say over.
Well, you take a look. The Mets have seen Smyly plenty, and it seems like they hit him pretty well right now. Pete Alonso, 273 with a homer. How about Eduardo Escobar, third baseman? 571, 14 at-bats with 4 homers and 4 RBIs. Francisco Lindor, 333. So there's some guys that can hit him pretty well. So hopefully Drew Smyly can keep doing what he's doing and hopefully keep the Mets scoring down, right?
Absolutely. Let's hope. Fingers crossed.
Game 2, Marcus Stroman will take his 3-4 record with a 3.05 ERA. He has been fun to watch other than that blip in Minnesota. Against Philadelphia, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 earned run. That Minneapolis start, 2.2 innings, 7 hits, 6 runs. That was the bad one. And against St. Louis, 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 runs. So I'm looking forward to the Stro show as always. That, and I think there's just something, that Stroman has a chip on his shoulder against
Absolutely
the Mets.
Right. There you go. That's where I was thinking, Crawly. You think he's going to want to just really stick it to him. He's a guy who I think holds grudges.
Absolutely. Now, what worries me about this one is that the Cubs are facing Tyler McGill, and we all know Stroman, other than the other day in Philly, has not had much run support. You're taking a look at McGill in his last start. He went against Tampa Bay, 6 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs. Against the Nationals, he went 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run. And against Colorado on 5-6, only 4.2 innings, 6 hit, 3 earned runs, but he also had 3 walks. So he had issues with walks in 2 of his 3 last start, not against the Rays, but against Washington and Colorado. So, I would say maybe, patient like they were the other day. I thought that start that they had the other day against Ranger Suarez was exactly the kind of thing that they're going to have to do against McGill if they want to have any success in this game right here. So looking at the numbers as far as Stroman versus the Mets, Pete Alonso doesn't have a lot of at-bats. Eduardo Escobar, 17, but doesn't hit him too well, 235. Francisco Lindor, they love playing against each other. And I talked to Stro, I interviewed him at Club 400, and he said Lindor was one of his favorite teammates. He bats 286 against Stroman. And then Gary Sanchez has 10 at-bats, 200. So not a lot of guys have a lot of at-bats. As far as the Cubs, they haven't seen Meagle much at all. Only Dansby Swanson 7 times with a 143 average. So that the two pitchers, and out of those two pitchers that the Cubs are facing, only one guy has ever seen either of the two pitchers. I don't like how this sounds, Dustin.
Yeah, it's a recipe for a bad start to a homestand. That's what it is.
Yeah,
especially Game 3, right? Game 3, we've got Jameson Taillon out there, and he's 8.10 ERA and too many walks and no confidence.
Well, this is going to get interesting, Dustin, because you say that, but it's also Carlos Carrasco is also having an awful season as well. Yeah. He's 0-2 with an 8.68 ERA. Now, the situation's kind of different. We all know that Taillon only went 2.1 innings against the Phils and gave up 6 earned runs, 6 hits. First inning was just a disaster against Houston, 4.2 innings, 7 hits, 4 earned runs, and against St. Louis, 2.2 innings, 5 hits, 4 earned runs. So he hasn't gotten out of the third in 2 out of his last 3 starts. So not good. That being said, Carlos Carrasco is a guy, I don't know if people remember this. He was on the Indians roster when the Cubs faced them in the World Series. And I wonder if he would have stayed healthy, if the Cubs would have been able to take the World Series in 2016. That's what happens. But, he had an injury, so he was out to start the season. He had a right elbow inflammation, so he didn't come back. He had a few spot starts with the minor league Birminghamton Rumble Ponies, classic triple A name right there. And then Rumble he was active. Oh yeah, the Rumble Ponies. So he was activated May 19th. So obviously he was injured to start the season, not to start the season. After a couple starts, they put him on the IL. And then he has just come back the 19th. So he pitched like 2 or 3 starts before he went on the IL. And then in his first start against the Guardians, he went 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks, and 3 Ks. So again, patient at bats. I don't know if he's on a pitch count. Don't know exactly his situation, but that this is a guy that's not that's still trying to get back into it. So the Cubs are going to have to look and do something to get this guy out early.
Yep. Let's hope. I mean, that you're going to have a crooked number. That's for sure. You're going to have some runs. No doubt. I mean, boy, I'm just so disappointed Crawly and Jameson Taillon right now. He talks the talk, but he's not walking the walk. That's for sure.
Yep, and he'll be the first to tell you that, but talk only goes so far, man. You got to start doing something here.
Got to do something. All right, who's hot? Who's not, Crawly? Who's hot? Who's not?
Well, let's go ahead and start with Seiya Suzuki, hot. He is 8 hits in his last 22 at-bats, 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, 10 strikeouts to 3 walks. He's averaging 364, 440, 818. And you can't talk about hot without talking about Christopher Morel. The guy
is hot. He is hot as the sun right now.
9 hits in his last 25 at-bats, but out of those 9 hits, 5 of them are home runs, Dustin. So half the time he makes contact, he's hitting a home run. 8 RBIs, 12 strikeouts to 2 walks, but he's slashing 360, 407, but his slug is a ridiculous 1.040. Not. When we take a look at the not right now, Ian Happ is struggling here. And when you look at Ian Happ, he only has 4 hits in the last 21 at-bats. 2 of them are doubles, 1 RBI, but he's slashing 190, 280, 286. Matt Mervis continuing to struggle. He's had less at-bats, obviously, lately, but he's 3 for his last 16. He has 1 homer and 1 RBI in his last 7 games, 188, 235, 375. So hopefully, like I said, coming back to Wrigley will do him some good. On the opposite side with the Mets, look out for Jeff McNeil, would you please? The guy has 10 hits in his last 23 at-bats, 2 RBIs. He's got 3 strikeouts and 1 walks. He's hitting 435, on base 458, slug 425. So he's not hitting for power, but he's getting on base all the time. Now, Eduardo Escobar, he's only had 13 at-bats recently. He has 5 hits, and he's had 1 home run, 3 runs for 385, 467, 615. But when you talk at the knot for the Mets, Brandon Nimmo is struggling. He has 4 hits in his last 28 bats, slugging 143, 172, 250. And also Pete Alonso is like Kyle Schwarber, one of those all or nothing guys. Right now, he only has 6 hits in his last 25 at bats, but 4 of them are home runs with 10 RBIs. So he's hitting 240. He's on base 269, but he's slugging 720. So just your classic slugger right there.
Right. He always seems to do good from what I can remember. I'm not looking at any numbers. It just feels like when he's at Wrigley, he does well.
Also, take a look at Francisco Lindor. He kind of reminds me in this Carlos Carrasco situation, or not Carlos Carrasco, but Carlos Correa situation, where he's been struggling. He had a big hit the other day. I don't know if that's going to get him on track or not, but something to kind of just keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, hopefully they all are cold, Crawly. Weather should be pretty decent for those games at Wrigley. So let's get into the prediction, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with the Cubs taking 1 of 3. I don't like the fact that they just have no experience against pretty much all the 2 of the 3 pitchers. So that's what has me nervous right now. And then you have a Taillion start for the 3rd one. So that doesn't make me really happy.
Right. I have to agree with you, Crawly. Not that I don't want to agree with you or disagree with you, right? But it's right away you worry about Taillion, but maybe because their pitcher also has a really high ERA in that one, maybe you could just outslug them in that one. I'm going to say 1 out of 3 for sure. They're not going to get swept by the Mets. That I know for sure. I believe that Marcus Stroman, again, has got that chip on his shoulder. He's going to be pitching lights out against his former team just to shove it to them. So I'm going to go 1 win, 2 losses against the Mets. But that game 3, go ahead and bet the over. Take that money that you won on Saturday and hit it on the over on Wednesday.
All right, we're going to pound the over. All righty.
Hey, at least you got to have a little bit of fun during this losing streak, right?
Right, it can't just all be Christopher Morel time, right?
Can't be all Christopher Morel. All right, Crawly, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow the socials, Fly the W on Facebook, on Instagram. You can email us, flythew670gmail.com. And now you can watch us, Crawly, on YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel.
And you know what? The Cubs are coming back home. Don't worry. I will be there on Tuesday. Grateful Dead night. What a way to kick it off. I'm excited. Let's go, Cubs. Hey, guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!